Pride is a wonderful, terrible thing. A seed that bears two vines, life and death. James Hurst. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's podcast. Today we will be discussing the short story titled Scarlet Ibis. So, Carlo, what can you tell us about it?
Okay, so first, a general information. As you mentioned, this job is named Scotted Ibis. It was published by the author James Hurston at 1960, and it was published in the Atlantic Monthly. This is a short story, and it is also the only story published by this author.
This short story was once adapted into an opera and was premiered in January 2015.
So just to conclude, this story is normally seen in high school or middle school anthropologies. Yeah, that would be.
So, what's the story about?
Well, this story narrates the memories of a man, specifically his childhood, and we can see that in the story revolves around his brother, who is nicknamed Doodle. But there's something specific about Doodle that affects the brother's relationship with him, and is that he has certain sickness and disabilities, and yeah, this affects their relationship.
Okay, so Doodle, as the bird of the main narrator and the main character, had a specific sickness and a weird sickness that didn't allow him to do like the culture, the normal activities that every person can do. Doodle was first named as William Armstrong, but when the brothers see that he was like crawling this and doing the movements like a buck, he decided to call him this way.
So yeah, because of this specific sickness, the brother felt frustrated about his little brother not to do the normal things or activities that a normal child could do, like walking or running. So this led the brother to feel frustrated and push Doodle, pressure him to these activities. So the physical exhaustion that this caused eventually led Doodle to die at the year of 7 years old. Yeah, 7 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you guys know why the name of the story?
The Scarlet Ibis is a bird that one day appears into the household, but the symbolism of this will be discussed further in the podcast.
Okay.
So what can you tell us about the setting of the story?
Well, the story itself takes place during the man's childhood in a rural area of North Carolina, United States. And the family that Doodle is born to is composed of the son, the mother, and, well, the brother. And there's some mentions of religion, as that is, like the I see is embodiment of religion that is present in the story.
It's very interesting.
So now we're going to present some of the theses that are present in the Scarlet Ibis. So Paula, what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, while reading the story, I found a message or thesis that was found throughout the story, which is that love can hurt. This is exemplified in page 194, where the narrator says, "There is within me a knot of cruelty born by the stream of love." And in here we can see that there are mixed feelings, that love and certain amount of hate or toxicity are mixed and result in a very toxic relationship.
Okay, so as a second thesis, we know that pride can turn into a venomous thing. As seen in that page 195, we can read, pride is a wonderful, terrible thing, a seed that bears two vines, life and death. So basically, in the story, we know that the bird of Doodle was a really bad person because he was putting a lot of pressure on Doodle just by the fact that he was disappointed about his abilities. He was not doing that because he wanted to help him. He was doing that because he only felt proud about him, and he only wants that actions to be considered as something good to him, not to Doodle.
Okay, so the third thesis is presented throughout the story, and in the story, the brother constantly pushes Doodle to do things beyond his physical capacities, and sometimes it accomplishes it, but in the last minute, the final push that the brother gives to Doodle finishes killing Doodle.
Okay, guys. So teams. What can you tell
Oh
us
yeah.
about it?
One team that, well, I think it's pretty obvious, but still, it's about the memory and the past. So you see how the story is narrated by the brother, like now as an adult, but he's reviving his memories as a child. I think it was between 6 and 20 years old, somewhere between there. But yeah, he's reviving his memories about his brother, his doodle, and how was his relationship with him. So yeah.
Oh, that's nice. I found something that it's a bit related, which is the Autumn Lane, and this is related because the relationship, as I said before, was quite toxic. And when the narrator is describing his childhood and his experiences, this is always these two factors are always present in the description, since well his the force and the stress that he put over Doodle led to his death. So he feels partially responsible, and this is reflected on the way that he describes everything, and he reflects on his behavior. And yeah.
Okay, so if we talk about the main theme of Pride, we'll find that Pride is this main thing that motivates Doodle to learn to do these things, right? To learn to be a normal kid. Why? As mentioned in the thesis, the narrator, as a kid, put a lot of pleasure in Doodle because he was disappointed about his condition. He was just put a lot of pressure to make him like a normal kid, and this was the thing that actually kills him because Zoodle was not didn't was prepared to that type of things, and that stuff was the main thing of his death, basically.
Yeah, I
Another
agree.
theme present throughout the story is nature, mostly because they live in a rural area, so there is a lot of connection with nature. Mm, this means that the nature and the people coexist in which each other, and there is a lot of symbolism in nature. For example, the scarlet ibis that represents Doodle, and the bleeding tree that foreshadows the death of Doodle.
So one other team that I found was love. So you see how this brother doodle relationship like developed through a story. So even though the brother treated with cruelty, doodle, at the end we see how he loves him, and the parents too. Like you see how the lack of vigilance they had with their children. This song that, well, they reflect somewhat an imperfect relationship, but overall, in the beginning of the story, when Rule was sick, I think they bring up the doctor. So this reflects the love that they had for Doodle, the parents had for Doodle, about his wellness and well-being. And the bird too. In the end of the story, you can see how he gets back to where Doodle was, now that. But but you see how he was like touched, heartwarmed, and yeah.
Okay, so what can you tell me about the characters that are developed in this story?
Okay, well, firstly, Doodle. Doodle seems to be an intelligent child, judging by his storytelling and by his non-conforming attitude towards fitting in. Um, he's described as a very sensitive and empathic person. This can be seen when he buries the Scarlet Ibis. He shows his empathic ability and he develops it towards the story. Similarly, the brother, even though he's a bit cruel to Doodle at the beginning, he's a loving person. He's very determined to achieve his goals, and he can act sometimes in a negative form, but just when he's just affected or influenced by negative factors. Similarly, his life was impacted when Doodle died. So this led him to reflect of his action and change his mind about his life and overall.
Okay, well, two characters that I really liked were the mother and father, whereas Doodle referred to them as Mama and Daddy, and this is because, well, parents are normally a source of love and preoccupation, but in the story it's quite different. Since, well, the doctor said that Doodle could die at any given moment, and because of that, the parents excluded him, So the normal roles or the tasks that parents performed were not the ones that they had in the story, at least at first. But then when the period of risk of death passed, the parents started to include him more, and for example, the mother started to be quite overprotective, but still encourage the formation of bonds between the brothers. And well, as the story progresses, the mom stops being as overprotective as she was and starts to treat them more equally. And the same thing happens with the dad. He starts to include doodling activities and they start to bond. And yeah, I really like that.
Okay, so another character that is present in the story is the aunt that's called Aunt Maisy. This is the stereotypical religious person of the family. She was the only one that believed that Lul will survive because he was born with the cult intact. This showed that she had really strong religious thoughts. Also, she was against the name of Dul because she thought that Dul will become a great person with a priest or something like that.
Okay, so an important thing about this story is the way that it feels when you read it. Well, because for me, when I started reading it, it was like a mixture of heaviness, yet somehow the story was very alive and vivid. And I think this has to do with the fact that, well, the main topic of this is the death of a child, but it also has a lot of descriptions about nature that just make it so vivid. For example, here I have a quote that says, "The sound of rain was everywhere, but the wind had died, and it fell straight down in several paths, like ropes hanging from the sky. As I waited, I peered through the downpour, but no one came." And this is just so conflicting because, well, it has this brave tone and there's a lot of despair that you can sense from that. But the way that it describes the rain is just so realistic that you can almost like feel it, you know?
So there are some connections with real life.
Yeah, of course, we have some connections with the real life. One of the main influences that we can see in this story was the fact that in those times there were many people that they were not diagnosed with a specific sickness. In this case, Zuru was diagnosed with a weird sickness, and he never known what type of sickness he had. And of course, we can see a total negligence of his parents because they never treat him in a proper way. Actually, in those times, there was a lot of things that happened between families. Like, for example, his brother was a really bad brother with him. He actually kills him, not in a direct way, but more in a indirect way. So yeah, we can see that the connection with real life. Concluding this point, it's that the negligence is from of his parents. We can see that the treatments or the diagnosis of those times were not as good as that ones that we have today, and the bad treatment that his brother didn't care about him. So what can you tell me about the style?
Oh, so you see how the author uses foreshadowing, like in the whole story. For example, I think it was in the beginning when they gave Doodle his name. It was William Armstrong. I think it was the aunt, but she said that William Armstrong only sounds good in a tombstone, foreshadowing Doodle's death. And similarly, when we see how the story develops and all that, we can see how the author uses the the scarlet ibis, sorry, as a foreshadowing Doodle's death. He also uses a bit of symbolism which relates Doodle and Scarlet Ibis. So at the end, when Doodle dies, the author describes how the Doodle has all here red blood, alluding to the Scarlet Ibis. But I think it also was some imaginary, right?
Yes, the imaginary in the story is used all the time. It's really descriptive and it really takes you to the place and it describes how it feels and how everything is set up. For example, when he says that beyond the reach of the everyday world, the slender rays of the sun burn orange in the pines. Here is describing like a landscape with a lot of Greece, and it's described as really beautiful.
Okay, so with this we conclude our podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope that you enjoyed our analysis of this short story, and I hope you had a great time.